I'll be honest, I procrastinate brilliantly. I can delay a decision for weeks while appearing thoughtful. I've perfected the art of strategic hesitation. And I've learned this isn't weakness, it's misdirected cunning. You see, procrastination is intelligence trapped in a cage of other people's timelines. Han Fei taught that effective rulers don't fight human nature, they redirect it. What if your procrastination is just ambition pointed at the wrong target? What if the solution isn't discipline, but permission to abandon what was never truly yours? Let me explain. You know what's fascinating about my relationship with procrastination? I used to think I was the problem. I would look at other people, these seemingly disciplined individuals who just did things, who just executed, who just moved through their days with this mechanical efficiency, and I thought something was fundamentally wrong with me. I thought I lacked some essential ingredient of success, some moral fiber, some internal engine that separated the winners from the losers. But then I started studying power. Real power, not the motivational poster version of power, but the cold, surgical understanding of how human beings actually operate. And I discovered something that changed everything. I discovered Han Fei, this ancient Chinese philosopher from the Legalist school, and I discovered Machiavelli. And I discovered that what I had been calling my weakness was actually my psyche, trying desperately to protect me from something far more dangerous than failure. It was trying to protect me from wasting my life on the wrong conquest. You've been lied to about procrastination. And I don't mean lied to in some casual way. I mean systematically, culturally, deliberately misled about what procrastination actually is and why it happens. Every productivity guru, every self-help book, every motivational speaker tells you the same story. They tell you procrastination is about laziness, about poor time management, about lacking discipline or willpower, or the right morning routines, or the right app, or the right planner, or the right wake-up time. They're treating symptoms while the disease festers underneath, completely unexamined. Here's the truth they won't tell you because it doesn't sell courses or books or seminars. Procrastination is your psyche's immune response to meaningless conquest. It's your soul staging a rebellion against tasks that serve everyone but you. It's your nervous system, this incredibly sophisticated biological computer detecting threat and activating defense mechanisms. And you know what? It's not broken. It's not malfunctioning. It's working exactly as designed. Think about it. Have you ever procrastinated on revenge? Have you ever put off something that genuinely excited you? Something that served your actual interests? Something that moved you toward a future you actually wanted? No, you don't procrastinate on pleasure. You don't procrastinate on protecting someone you love. You don't procrastinate on building something that feels alive and real and yours. That's not because those things are easier. Often they're much harder. Often they require more energy, more risk, more vulnerability than the email you've been avoiding for 3 weeks. But you do them anyway, immediately, sometimes obsessively. Why? Because they're yours. Because somewhere deep in your nervous system, in that ancient animal part of your brain that calculates survival and threat and opportunity, you recognize these tasks as serving your authentic interests. Your real interests, not your performed interests, not your should interests, not the interests that your parents or your teachers or your culture or your Instagram feed told you to have. Your actual interests. And this is where Han Fei comes in. Han Fei was writing in ancient China during the Warring States period, this incredibly brutal time when kingdoms were constantly attacking each other, alliances were forming and dissolving, and survival required cold, precise strategic thinking. And Han Fei developed this philosophy called legalism that said something very simple and very radical. He said, don't expect people to be good. Don't build systems that require virtue or moral character or noble intentions. Build systems where people act from self-interest, and those self-interested actions produce the outcomes you want. In other words, don't fight human nature, redirect it. Now I know what you're thinking. You're thinking this sounds cynical. This sounds manipulative. This sounds like I'm about to tell you to become some cold, calculating machine who only cares about yourself. But that's not what I'm saying at all. What I'm saying is this. You've been trying to fight your procrastination with willpower and discipline and shame and guilt, and it's not working. It's not working because you're using the wrong weapon. You're bringing moral judgment to a strategic problem. Procrastination isn't a moral failing. It's information. It's your inner strategist, and yes, you have one, we all do, trying to get your attention, trying to tell you something crucial, trying to say, this task you're avoiding, this thing you can't seem to make yourself do, it's not serving you. It's serving someone else's narrative about who you should be. Let me tell you a story. Imagine a general with 2 armies under his command. One army is fighting for his kingdom, defending the land he loves, protecting the people he grew up with. This army charges into battle singing. They fight with everything they have. They take risks. They innovate. They cover for each other. They turn impossible situations into victories. The other army is fighting for a neighboring king who conscripted this general through guilt and obligation and appeals to duty.
First, I do what I call the audit. I write down everything I'm procrastinating on. Everything. The big projects, the small emails, the phone calls I keep not making, the decisions I keep not deciding. I get it all out where I can see it. Then, next to each item, I ask one simple question. If I never did this, who would actually suffer? Not hypothetically, not in some abstract sense. Actually, concretely, who would experience real pain or loss or difficulty? And if the answer is only my guilt, if the answer is only my sense of obligation, if the answer is only my fear of being judged, then I've found a ghost obligation. I found something that exists in my life not because it serves me or anyone I care about, but because I'm haunted by some internalized voice telling me I should care about it. And here's the radical move. I give myself permission to abandon it. Just like that. No guilt, no agonizing, no slow fade where I pretend I'm still going to do it someday. I just cut it loose. I let it die. Because every ghost obligation on your list is draining energy from your real obligations, from your chosen obligations, from the work that actually matters. Han Fei says the wise ruler cuts off diseased branches to save the tree. Your to-do list is full of diseased branches, other people's branches, branches that looked good when you grafted them on but that are now pulling nutrients away from your real growth. Cut them off, ruthlessly. Without apology. Now, for the tasks that remain, the ones that do serve someone you care about or that connect to a genuine consequence, I do a second test. I call it the ownership test. I ask, am I doing this to become someone or to please someone? Because those two things feel similar, but they produce completely opposite results. When you're doing something to become someone, to develop a skill, to build something that matters to you, to move toward a vision you actually want. That's energizing. That's generative. That might be difficult, it might be frustrating, it might require struggle, but it doesn't produce the same kind of procrastination. It produces the good kind of resistance. The kind that means you're at your edge, you're growing, you're reaching for something that matters. But when you're doing something to please someone, to meet their expectations, to avoid their disappointment, to perform a version of yourself that makes them comfortable, that's depleting. That's where procrastination lives. Because your psyche knows the difference. Your body knows the difference. You can't fool your nervous system with rational arguments about why you should care about something. Your nervous system is a truth detector. It reads your actual investment, not your performed investment. And this is where it gets really interesting, because sometimes you'll discover that a task you thought was about becoming is actually about pleasing. You thought you wanted to write that book, but actually you want other people to see you as someone who wrote a book. You thought you wanted to start that business, but actually you want your parents to finally respect your choices. You thought you wanted to get in shape, but actually you want your ex to regret leaving you. I'm not saying those motivations are wrong. I'm saying they're weak fuel. They might get you started, but they won't sustain you through difficulty, through failure, through the long middle where nobody's watching and nothing's working and you're just grinding away in obscurity. Only real becoming survives that valley. Only real ownership carries you through. So you have to get ruthlessly honest with yourself. You have to ask, if nobody ever knew I did this, if I got zero external recognition or validation or approval, would I still do it? If the answer is no, you don't own it. You're renting it from other people's opinions. And rented ambitions produce procrastination. Now, let's say you've done the audit, you've done the ownership test, you've cut away the ghost obligations and the borrowed ambitions. What's left should be tasks that genuinely serve you. Tasks you actually own, tasks that connect to your real interests and your real growth. But you're still procrastinating. Why? Because even with tasks we own, we often set them up in ways that activate resistance. We make them too big, too vague, too dependent on conditions we can't control. We turn them into these enormous, intimidating mountains that our psyche looks at and says, absolutely not. That's too much. That's too hard. I don't have the energy for that. And this is where Han Fei's genius really shines, where legalism becomes practical. Han Fei says, don't rely on people being extraordinary. Don't build systems that require heroic effort or perfect conditions or ideal circumstances. Build systems where the desired action is the path of least resistance. Make it inevitable. Make it easier to do the thing than to not do the thing. Let me give you an example. Let's say you want to write. You have this project, this creative thing, and you keep not doing it. You keep finding reasons. You keep waiting for the right mood, the right energy, the right inspiration. The traditional productivity advice says, build discipline, set a schedule, wake up early, create a routine, force yourself to show up every day. And that works, sometimes, for some people, for a while. But it relies on willpower. It relies on you being strong enough, motivated enough, disciplined enough to override your resistance day after day after day. Han Fei would say, that's a terrible system. That's a system built on virtue, on moral character, on you being better than you probably are on any given Tuesday. Instead, make it inevitable. Open a document on your computer and never close it. Make it so that every time you open your laptop, there it is. Not buried in a folder, not hidden behind other apps, just there, staring at you. There's only what works for you. And what works for you is whatever makes the desired action easier than the alternative. That's it. That's the whole secret. Make doing easier than not doing. Now, I want to talk about something that's probably making some of you uncomfortable. This idea of abandoning tasks. This idea of strategic quitting. This idea that some things on your list genuinely don't deserve to be there. Because we've been taught that quitting is failure, that abandoning projects or obligations or commitments is weak, that follow-through is sacred, that if you start something, you finish it. And I understand that. I understand the appeal of that mindset. There's something honorable about it, something noble. But it's also tyranny. It's the tyranny of the past self over the present self. It says that who you were when you made that commitment, what you knew then, what you wanted then, what you understood then, that matters more than who you are now, what you know now, what you want now, what you understand now. And that's insane. People change, circumstances change, information changes. The person who committed to something 6 months ago or a year ago or 5 years ago, they're not you anymore. They're a ghost, they're a memory, they're a previous iteration. And yes, there's value in honoring commitments, in being reliable, in following through. But there's also value in being honest, in being adaptive, in being willing to say, I was wrong. This isn't working. This isn't serving anyone. I'm stopping. Han Fei would say, the wise ruler adapts to changing conditions. The fool rigidly adheres to outdated strategies because he's more concerned with appearing consistent than with actually winning. Your life is not a performance. Your integrity is not measured by how many things you finish, regardless of whether they still make sense. Your worth is not determined by your ability to suffer through obligations that stopped serving you years ago. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to look at your list of procrastinated tasks, the ones that survived the audit and the ownership test. And I want you to ask one more question. Is this still true? Is this goal still true for who I am now? Is this project still true for where I'm trying to go? Is this obligation still true for what I actually want my life to look like? Because sometimes we're procrastinating, not because we're weak or disciplined, but because we're carrying dead ambitions, zombie goals, things that used to matter but don't anymore, things we feel like we should want but actually don't, things we started for reasons that are no longer relevant. And we keep them on the list because sunk cost fallacy, because we already invested so much, because what will people think if we quit now, because we're not quitters, because we always finish what we start. All terrible reasons. All fears disguised as principles. Machiavelli says, sometimes the most strategic move is retreat. Sometimes you preserve your army by refusing to fight. Sometimes victory means recognizing which battles aren't worth winning. And applying that to your personal life, to your projects and goals and obligations, sometimes the most strategic move is admitting something doesn't serve you anymore, doesn't align with who you've become, doesn't connect to the life you're actually trying to build, and letting it go. Without guilt, without shame, without the story that you failed. Because you didn't fail. You adapted. You learned. You changed. You became someone new, and the person you became doesn't need to carry the unfinished business of who you were. That's not failure. That's evolution.
If you're avoiding something because it's genuinely not yours, if it's a borrowed ambition, a colonized goal, something you're doing to please someone else, then the solution is permission. Permission to abandon it. Permission to disappoint people. Permission to choose your own path, even if it confuses or upsets or saddens the people who love you. That's hard. That's brutal, actually. But it's also necessary. Because you cannot build a meaningful life on other people's definitions of meaning. You cannot be fulfilled pursuing someone else's version of fulfillment. You cannot find your purpose by living someone else's purpose. It doesn't work. It's never worked. And your procrastination is proof. Your procrastination is your psyche's last line of defense against complete self-betrayal. So honor it. Listen to it. Ask what it's trying to protect. And then make a choice. A conscious, deliberate, owned choice about what you're actually going to do. Maybe you decide the borrowed ambition is worth it anyway. Maybe you decide that, yes, this is someone else's dream, but the life it enables, or the people it pleases, or the doors it opens, those things matter enough to you that you're willing to pursue it consciously, strategically, with eyes open. That's fine. That's not colonization anymore. That's negotiation. That's strategy. That's choosing to do something that serves others because it also serves you in some way you've identified and accepted. When you make that choice consciously, the resistance often dissolves. because you're not fighting yourself anymore. You're not trying to force yourself to want something you don't want. You're acknowledging, I don't particularly want this, but I want what comes with it, so I'm choosing it anyway. That's power. That's agency. That's the opposite of procrastination, even if you're doing the exact same task. Or maybe you decide it's not worth it. Maybe you decide the cost to your authenticity, to your sense of self, to your actual desires, it's too high. Maybe you decide you'd rather face the disappointment, the confusion, the judgment of others than continue betraying yourself. That's also power. That's also agency. That's you taking your life back from whoever or whatever colonized it. And yes, there will be consequences. Yes, people will be upset. Yes, you might face real practical difficulties, financial, social, emotional, from that choice. But at least you'll be facing them as yourself, as someone living your own life, making your own choices, walking your own path. And that's worth everything. Now, let's talk about something I think is crucial, but rarely discussed: the relationship between procrastination and perfectionism. Because for a lot of us, procrastination isn't about not caring. It's about caring too much. It's about having standards so high, expectations so demanding, vision so pristine, that actually starting feels like a betrayal of the perfect version that exists in your mind. You see the finished product, the polished result, the masterpiece. And when you sit down to begin, when you face the blank page or the empty canvas or the rough draft, it feels so inadequate compared to what you know it could be that you just stop. You put it off. You wait for the right mood, the right energy, the right inspiration, the right conditions where you can actually do it justice. But those conditions never come, because perfectionism isn't about standards. It's about fear. It's fear of being ordinary, fear of being judged, fear of revealing your limitations, fear of trying your hardest and still producing something mediocre. And it's one of the most sophisticated forms of self-sabotage I know, because it looks like caring, it looks like having high standards, it looks like refusing to settle for less than your best. But really, it's just a way of never having to find out what your best actually is. If you never start, you never fail. If you never finish, you never face judgment. If you never put something out into the world, you never have to deal with the gap between your vision and your current ability. You stay safe. You stay perfect. You stay trapped. Because here's what perfectionism doesn't understand. Everything good that exists in the world started as something bad. Every master was once a beginner. Every finished product was once a rough draft. Every skill was once clumsy and awkward and embarrassing. Growth requires being willing to be bad at something. Improvement requires being willing to be worse than you wish you were. Creation requires being willing to produce things that don't match your vision. And if you're not willing to do that, if your perfectionism demands that everything you make meets your standards right from the start, you've essentially decided never to make anything at all. Because it's not possible. It's not how humans work. We learn by doing badly, and then doing slightly less badly, and then doing okay, and then doing well, and then, if we persist long enough, doing excellently. But we have to be willing to move through all those stages. We have to be willing to suck. And perfectionism says, no, I refuse. I'd rather do nothing than do it imperfectly. Which means perfectionism is just procrastination wearing a mask of standards. So if you recognize this in yourself, if your procrastination has this particular flavor of waiting for conditions that will never be right, waiting for a version of yourself that doesn't exist yet, waiting for the ability to execute at a level you haven't earned yet, you need a different approach. Every time you do something hard, you're building it. Every time you keep a commitment to yourself, you're building it. Every time you choose your stated values over your immediate feelings, you're building it. It's like a muscle, and the more you use it, the stronger it gets, until eventually doing hard things becomes part of your identity, part of how you understand yourself, part of the automatic story you tell about who you are. I'm someone who follows through. I'm someone who does what I say. I'm someone who doesn't quit when things get difficult. And once that's your identity, once that's your story about yourself, procrastination becomes much rarer. Not because you've eliminated all resistance, not because you've perfected your systems, but because acting despite resistance is just what you do. It's who you are. And you protect that identity the same way you protect anything valuable. Now, I want to talk about one more thing before we get to the practical steps. One more insight that I think changes everything once you really internalize it. It's this. Procrastination is often about agency, about the feeling that you have no control, that you're just responding to demands, meeting obligations, fulfilling expectations, that your life is happening to you rather than being created by you. And when you feel that way, when you feel powerless, when you feel like you're just a passenger in your own life, your psyche rebels. It stages these small acts of resistance, these tiny refusals, these moments where you assert, however ineffectively, that you still have choice, that you're not completely controlled, that there's some part of you that can still say no. Even if you're only saying no to yourself, even if the only person you're hurting is you. Because at least it's something you chose. At least it's an expression of will, even if it's self-destructive will. At least it proves you're not completely powerless. This is why procrastination is so common in high-control environments, in demanding jobs, in relationships where one person dominates, in situations where you feel you have no choices, no options, no power. It's not that you're weak or lazy. It's that you're staging a rebellion with the only weapon you have: refusal. And the solution isn't better time management or stronger discipline. The solution is reclaiming agency, reclaiming power, reclaiming the sense that you're making choices rather than just responding to demands. This is why the audit is so important. This is why identifying ghost obligations and borrowed ambitions matters so much. Because every time you cut something loose, every time you say, "No, I'm not doing this anymore," every time you choose to disappoint someone or abandon a project or change course, you're reclaiming agency. You're proving to yourself that you have power, that you're not trapped, that you can shape your life according to your actual desires, not just react to other people's expectations. And when you feel that agency, when you feel that power, when you feel like you're actually choosing your path rather than just walking the path others laid out for you, procrastination often just dissolves. Because you don't need to stage small rebellions anymore. You've already won the war. You're already free. So, if you're struggling with chronic procrastination, if it's not just occasional resistance, but a constant pattern that's affecting your life, ask yourself, where have I given away my power? Where am I living according to someone else's agenda? Where am I fulfilling obligations I never really chose? And start taking it back. Not all at once, not dramatically, but steadily, deliberately, one choice at a time.
Until you're living a life that actually feels like yours. Until your days are filled with tasks you actually want to do, for reasons that actually matter to you, in service of a vision that actually resonates with who you are. When you get there, and you can get there, procrastination becomes rare. Not because you've developed perfect discipline, but because you've eliminated the conditions that create procrastination in the first place. You've stopped fighting wars you don't believe in. You've stopped pursuing victories that don't matter to you. You've stopped living someone else's life. And when you're living your own life, when you're pursuing your own goals, when you're building your own vision, you don't need to be dragged forward. You run. All right, let's get practical. Let's talk about the 7 steps, the actual, concrete, implementable framework you can.
When X happens, I do Y. Every time, without exception, until it's not a choice anymore, until it's just what you do, until it's part of your identity, part of your routine, part of the structure of your day. Step 6, create real stakes. Your future self is a stranger. You don't feel connected to them. So promises you make to your future self, I'll do this tomorrow, they don't carry weight. They don't feel binding. You need to create accountability that crosses time, that makes your present commitment impossible for your future self to ignore. For me, this sometimes means money. I use apps where I commit to doing something, and if I don't do it, I get charged. Real money. Money that goes to a charity I hate or just disappears into the void. And that works. Because my brain hates losing money more than it hates doing difficult work. So when the choice is between engaging with my task and losing money, I engage with my task. Or it means public commitment. Telling people what I'm going to do, posting about it, making it visible, so that if I don't follow through, there's social cost, there's embarrassment, there's the sense that I've failed publicly rather than privately. Or it means accountability partners, people who check in, who ask if I did what I said I'd do, who hold me to my commitments in a way I can't hold myself. Whatever creates real stakes for you, whatever makes future you unable to rationalize away present you's intentions. Because without stakes, without consequences, without something real on the line, you'll always find a reason to put it off. You'll always choose comfort. You'll always let your future self deal with it. But when there's a real cost to avoidance, when procrastination actually hurts in some tangible way, suddenly doing the thing becomes the easier option. And that's the whole point. That's the legalist insight. You're not trying to be better. You're trying to make doing the thing less painful than not doing the thing. You're redesigning the incentive structure so that your natural desire to avoid pain works in your favor instead of against you. Step 7. Reward immediately. This is the last piece, and it's crucial. You need to create a positive feedback loop. You need to associate doing the hard thing with immediate pleasure, not just distant hypothetical benefits. Most of us have been taught to delay gratification, to work hard now for rewards later, to sacrifice in the present for the sake of the future. And that's fine, sometimes, for some things. But it's a terrible strategy for building new habits, for overcoming procrastination, for creating sustainable behavior change. Because your brain doesn't care about later. It cares about now. It makes decisions based on immediate consequences, not distant possibilities. So you give it immediate consequences, immediate rewards, immediate positive reinforcement. You finish your minimum daily task, immediately do something you enjoy. Watch a show, eat something delicious, play a game, whatever brings you pleasure, whatever feels like a reward. No guilt. No, I have to earn this. No, I should save this for when I've done more. Immediately. Every single time.
So your brain learns, when I do this hard thing, good stuff follows immediately. Not someday, not eventually, right now. And that creates a positive association. That creates motivation that's intrinsic rather than extrinsic. That creates a sense of, I want to do this thing because doing it feels good, because it's connected to pleasure and satisfaction and reward. Machiavelli understood this. He said pleasure secures loyalty. That people will follow you, will support you, will stay committed to you if you make them feel good, if you associate yourself with positive experiences. And the same applies to yourself, to your own projects, to your own goals. You need to make yourself loyal to your own commitments. And you do that by rewarding yourself, by making the experience of engaging with your goals pleasurable rather than purely painful. Not eventually pleasurable, not it will feel good when I'm done, immediately pleasurable, right now, every time, without exception. That's how you build sustainable momentum. That's how you overcome procrastination, not through force, but through redesigning your relationship with effort itself. So those are the 7 steps. The audit. Identify what's actually yours versus what's borrowed. The ownership test. Distinguish between becoming and pleasing. Shrink the barrier. Commit only to the smallest possible action. Create visible progress. Make effort concrete and tangible. Eliminate decision points. Turn desired behavior into automatic ritual. Create real stakes. Make future you unable to escape present you's commitments. And reward immediately. Associate effort with instant pleasure. These aren't moral principles. These aren't character traits. These aren't things you need to be virtuous enough to do. These are strategies, systems, designs for working with your psychology instead of against it. And they work. Not perfectly, not every time, but consistently enough that over weeks and months and years, they produce dramatic changes in what you're able to accomplish, in what you actually do rather than just intend to do. So here's what I want you to understand as we come to the end of this. You came here thinking you needed to fix yourself, thinking something was wrong with you, thinking you lacked discipline or character or some essential quality that separated successful people